Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Che Rao. I'm the Director of Communications at the School of Public Affairs, and I am joined today for an SPA Live Explains the 2024 election with Betsy Fischer Martin, who is the Executive Director of SPA's Women in Politics Institute. She is a former Emmy Award-winning TV producer, producer of, um, uh, sorry, of
Meet the press. Meet the press.
Yeah, Meet the Press. Sorry, I got distracted by something. Sorry about that, guys.
That's okay.
Emmy Award-winning producer of Meet the Press with Tim Russert, and has been with SPA now for 5 years, correct?
5+ I think. Yeah, but who's counting?
Yep. And she is here at the Democratic National Convention, following all of the news on the floor, and will share her insight on all of the happenings over the last 2 days. I'm also joined today by Aidan Levinson, a class of 2023 American University SPA American University grad, who is a delegate this year, the second time he's been a delegate. He was a delegate in 2020, and is also in Chicago. And he's going to be able to give us a sense of the mood on the floor as a Biden delegate who is now unpledged, or soon to be a soon-to-be Harris delegate, if you will. But just to start, Betsy, over the first 2 days, what have your impressions been so far?
Well, thanks, Che. It's great to be with everybody and see Aidan. One of the great things about coming to a convention like this and AU's involvement in so many things is that I've already run into several former AU students working at the convention, working in journalism. So it's a lot of fun to see how AU students kind of are involved in all the political process. And it's great to have Aidan with us to talk about it as well. But my impressions, and I've been both nights, that first night, Biden's speech, I think, fell a little bit flat. It was very long. They missed the primetime hour, and there's some debate of whether that was intentional or not, but it was a very long speech. And I think it reminded a lot of people in the hall on sort of why we had to turn the page, why that wasn't going to really be putting our best foot forward, the Democrats' best foot forward in the fall. And I think it was, kind of a thank you, Joe, was sort of the theme, but then he just kept going and going. And so, going to the second night, I think Biden kind of literally and figuratively is gone, when he kind of exited stage left. And by last night, his name really didn't get much attention at all. Michelle Obama spoke, of course. She didn't mention him at all. In fact, she kind of alluded to some of the page turning in terms that I don't think were exactly complimentary to him. She kind of noted that, something wonderfully magical is in the air, and kind of described this familiar feeling that's been like buried too far, too deep for too long. And those kind of wasn't exactly a full endorsement of Biden's term. Obama did kind of a perfunctory thank you for your service, but again, moved on quickly. And I know that, the relationship between those two is fractured a bit, to say the least. But anyway, looking, I think once the kind of the Biden, passing the torch, if you will, I think the big goals of the convention are really to introduce Kamala Harris to the electorate. And, even though she's been vice president, people don't really have a sense of her. And, we've only got, 70+ days left. And so I think the real focus is introducing her, and to some extent, her new running mate, Tim Walz, who, even more people aren't familiar with, and trying to continue to prosecute the case against Trump to drive turnout and enthusiasm. And that's really the focus, I think, on what we're hearing from the stage. Tonight, we're going to hear from Tim Walz, and then there are going to be 2 short films that were produced actually by a former colleague of mine who was the president of ABC News and now does film production. But they're going to be on sort of the big lie of the election denial, and also on Trump's role on January 6th. And so we saw even on Monday a film, kind of a Law and Order parody with prosecutor Kamala Harris and career criminal Donald Trump. So that's going to be, again, I think the main 2 themes for the rest of the convention is introducing Kamala, humanizing her, personalizing her and then prosecuting that case against Donald Trump.
Yeah, just to follow up on that, you said, it really isn't a lot of time, and there isn't a great deal of knowledge about Kamala Harris, if you will. There's not a great sense of her. In
Right.
some ways, is that an advantage for a candidate when they don't have a lot to go negative on necessarily, or is it that she's a blank slate? Are people
Yeah,
projecting?
it's a good point. And I was thinking about that, in terms of, the last time we had, a woman on the top of the ticket, right, in 2016 with Hillary Clinton, and the enormous amount of baggage that she sort of brought, say what you will about her. She certainly had, 30 plus years of, criticisms, thrown at her. And, while Kamala, I don't think for the last, 3+ years has enjoyed, a ton of positive press. I mean, there have been critics. There's nothing that has stuck to her like, the email issue that followed Hillary around and all of the other scandals. And so to a large extent, she is pretty much not known to a lot of people. I mean, even just driving around here, it's always fun to kind of talk to cab drivers and see what they know. And, some of them I talked to just had no sense of her whatsoever. And, I think trying to humanize her, and so to avoid sort of the shorthand painting of her as like a California, left-wing liberal, right? There is this humanization that I think all conventions have. I mean, looking back, I remember my very first convention that I attended was in 1992, not to date myself too much, but we all remember sort of the biography of Bill Clinton and the film, The Place Called Hope, and the glitzy Hollywood film that was produced about his biography. Last night, we saw, second gentleman, Kamala Harris's husband, Doug Emhoff, sharing the story of how they were dating and, awkward voicemails, really tried to humanize her and their relationship. So, that is to say, that's, I think, the work of the convention and what folks are trying to do. And, this is, an introduction. I mean, this is an incredibly unusual circumstance that we have found ourselves in with a nominee that has not gone through any of the primary process. And it's just, really the race is on.
Mhm.
So that's going to be their focus here.
And just to follow up, one of the initiatives of the Women in Politics Institute is obviously the Gender on the Ballot polling project that you run with, which you ran with the Barbara Lee Family Foundation and now is fully housed under WPI. And I guess the question, based on your sort of experience looking at the context of gender in the larger U.S. elections, is there a different feeling? You compared Kamala Harris's candidacy to Hillary Clinton's. Now, has there been sort of a shift in the last, I would say 10 years or almost 10 years that has allowed for more, I would say, open-mindedness with the women at the top of the ticket?
Yeah, and I think we have certainly made progress, and there's certainly, ways to go. But even having Kamala Harris as the vice president, right? That has, she hasn't quite. We don't quite have the female on the presidential placemat yet, but maybe we have the vice presidential placemat. And thinking about kids growing up and what to emulate and how to think about things. And I think we've done a better job of kind of what I like to think of as the see something, say something mode, to harken back to TSA wording. But, when there is discussions to be had, when we see, media coverage that is sexist, we hear, misogynistic comments, saying something about that and speaking up about it and saying, hey, wait a second. I think that has evolved certainly as well. And, the things that we're trying to do at Women in Politics Institute is shed a light on a lot of that. You mentioned the polling project. We're going to be having a poll that we do periodically about women voters, about issues that are important to women voters. And I get asked a lot about, the gender gap and suburban women and how much a difference they're going to make. And, I think at the end of the day, I think we could see in this election probably the biggest gender gap that we've ever seen in a presidential election. And so really trying to take the temperature of, what's important to women, what they're responding to, what's going to drive them to the polls. And then also, the broader the question of, you mentioned Kamala Harris, how do people view a potential female president of the United States? What what does that entail, and kind of what are those maybe biases or stereotypes that are still existing out there?
Um, Aidan, this I'm going to throw it to you because Betsy talked a little bit about taking the temperature. Can you tell me what the temperature is among the delegates on the floor about, first off, as a Biden delegate, what were your feelings about the developments that ended with him sort of stepping aside and ceding the spotlight to Kamala Harris? And then secondly, what is the mood among the delegates that were pledged to Biden about Kamala Harris?
Yeah, for sure. Well, first of all, thanks for having me. It's been electric and very exciting to be here. And as I was saying earlier, sorry, my voice is a little raspy because I've been screaming so much every single night. As I was saying earlier, day one Biden guy, been with him since he announced in 2019. So that 2 week stretch after the debate was very tough, was very emotional, very challenging. We weren't sure what was going to happen, but we were prepared, and you saw that boost of enthusiasm after he announced he's withdrawing, and Kamala Harris was going to take the torch here. And with that, I think you can see just the energy. Every single arena she's filling, every single night, everybody's screaming at the top of their lungs. Everybody that comes out, everybody's excited. And we were talking about earlier Biden's speech and how that might have been falling flat with some people. I can tell you on the floor, our feeling was that was just not the case. I mean, we're in the context here of nearly all the delegates, except for a few uncommitted folks, were pledged to Biden. I mean, these are his delegates. They ran because they support him and they believe in him, me being one of them. So we were really excited to see him and thank him for what he's done.
And on the floor now too, are there people who are still yet to be convinced about Kamala Harris, even though they're delegates, or is the feeling now pretty unanimous?
No, extremely unanimous. I mean, again, it goes back to the energy. You can feel it every single person that comes out, and they're hitting all of the reasons why. No matter who it is, no matter who it would have been. I mean, we need a united front because of what's at stake. So all our delegates recognize that. I recognize that. Everybody's really, really excited and fired
up. So for those who are watching who maybe don't understand what a delegate is or does, can you give me a little bit, or give us a little bit of background on how you got involved, what your role is as a delegate, and what you see the path forward is, now till the election, what your role will be?
Mm-hmm. So I was born and raised Eastern Pennsylvania in the Lehigh Valley, right near Allentown. Got heavily involved in political consulting 2017. That's gone down a little bit since I started law school, but still involved nevertheless. And as I explained, day one Biden guy back in 2020. And when the opportunity to be a delegate came up, I put my name in. Wasn't sure what was going to happen, but was picked. And that kind of increased my personal responsibility that I felt to stay involved and stay engaged. So we didn't get that in-person convention in 2020, and Biden's actually been kind of robbed of the convention where he would be the nominee and be rolled out this way. So, but in terms of the role of a delegate, it's kind of been watered down over the years, but it kind of revved up with the recent events of this election cycle, having to pick a new nominee. Our biggest responsibility, obviously, is to vote the way our home districts voted. We're broken out by congressional district all across the country. So I'm from my congressional district, the 7th in Pennsylvania. So we're a portion based off how people vote in the primary. We cast our ballots, and then the roll call happens. Yesterday was ceremonial, where they went through all the states because we did it ahead of time virtually because of some ballot access issues. So that's one responsibility. But we also pass a platform every 4 years. That's our responsibility as well. That's developed by the platform committee, then come to the floor. But it's more meaningful too, because some people might think all the delegates are really insiders, but I think this campaign has been really, really intentional about making a reflection of America among the delegation. I think myself, young people of all demographics being selected as delegates and being on the floor is a real testament to that. And I'm not just a delegate this cycle, I'm one of our 3 whips for Pennsylvania. So during the roll call process, was making sure everybody knew how to fill out their ballots, how to turn those in, get those in as soon as possible, because just to show that excitement, and we did that. But on the floor too now, making sure everybody knows who's coming up, what's going on. So it's been really cool.
Aidan, what was Pennsylvania's intro song yesterday? I can't remember.
So it was Boys to Men to start, and then
Philly's
it was
finest.
Black and Yellow
Oh
for
yeah,
Pittsburgh. So they went from Philly to Pittsburgh.
that was
That was
fun.
really cool. Yesterday was choreographed so well. It was so
Yeah, it was
amazing to be on
great.
the floor.
I think they now
Yeah.
have like a playlist people are publishing of all the state
Mhm.
intro songs, which is a
And
lot.
then I thought the most exciting part yesterday was when Little John came out, because I
Yeah.
think they're sprinkling so many surprises throughout it. It's just, and
I
that's a
know.
point I want to make too, is that since this switch, I mean, I've had so many people reach out to me who I never thought would be involved or
Mhm.
tuned in as much as they are. But people my age who maybe hadn't gone to AU, hadn't been in DC, were texting, watching the convention. I'm like, convention. And they're like, why is the DNC such a rave? I'm like, well, because we're the fun party, obviously. But I mean, it's just, it's so, I'm very proud to be a Democrat today because of just all the enthusiasm we have.
Speaking of that enthusiasm, yes, last night was a big night with Barack Obama and Michelle Obama taking the stage and giving speeches that in some ways the tone was different between the two. What were the impressions on the floor, at least from your experience?
So I mean, again, a lot of folks there might not have been at big events like that before. So it was electric again. I mean, a lot of people are talking about how they remember how the energy might be at or surpassing 2008. So to have them come out, knowing the history there, I think was really meaningful. In terms of feelings on the floor, it seems a lot of people liked Michelle's speech better than Barack's. I'm probably in that category as well, and he kind of alluded to that at the beginning, like, how stupid am I to follow Michelle Obama? But I think I watched their speeches virtually in 2020 and 20. I wasn't at the convention in 2016 either. But their tone is definitely a lot more sharp than it's been because of, again, what's at stake here, and they want to preserve their legacy, and that's really important. And I think that shone through in their speeches, and people are feeling it too.
Yeah, it was definitely Michelle Obama unplugged, right?
It was.
What, Betsy, it was an edgier speech, I think.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Than what she's given in the past, and then definitely President Obama's
Yeah, and I think, Aidan alluded to that point. The stakes are high. They've endured many years of Trump leveling attacks, and it seems like the gloves are off to a certain extent.
Is there a sense that she was the better vehicle for that message than President Obama, or is it just that it was just her decision to do that?
I don't know how it divvied up, but I mean, there's no doubt she was very effective. And I thought he was great as well, but she is definitely a hard act to follow, that's for sure.
Okay. So just as a reminder to folks, we are taking questions from the audience. Please leave your questions in the comment section of our live streams, either on Facebook or Instagram or YouTube. We are monitoring, and we will get reactions from our panelists as your questions come in. But one of the first questions that I got from the audience, which I can share, is in the vein of Michelle Obama's speech. We did talk about how it's edgier. In the past, would that have been seen as, given, Betsy, your understanding of the gender dynamics in U.S. politics, in the past, would that have been seen as a liability for a woman politician to sort of deliver a speech that was a little bit more on the attack than a male counterpart, and have we kind of moved beyond that?
Well, I think it's interesting. I mean, you know, I think regardless of gender, when a candidate is in attack mode, he or she pays a price with voters for being on the attack. What's notable here is Michelle Obama is not on the ballot, right? And so it's more effective to do, which is why you see, super PACs when you're thinking about advertising, they're the ones that do the negative ads because you don't want to have, paid for by Kamala Harris necessarily at the end of a negative ad, that the person who's doing that pays a price. And so it's an effective technique to have these kind of surrogates like Michelle Obama, like Barack Obama, really, doing sort of the attacks versus coming out of the candidate's mouth. And I think when you layer in gender to that, I think it's even more amplified. But I think the big note here is, Michelle Obama, extremely popular, probably one of the most popular politicians, even though she's not necessarily a politician, but politician adjacent, that there is in this country, right? And so she can do that in a very effective way and not necessarily have to kind of pay that electoral price that we see that candidates are affected by.
Okay, one other question from our audience right now. And I think this is a fair question to both of you, but the convention has featured a lot of prominent figures outside of, and celebrities. So outside of politicians, I'm right off the bat, I think Steve Kerr was there talking about his Olympic experience, etc. Do you think that has an influence on public perception of the Democratic Party? And what is that? Aidan, do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I think that goes back to a bunch of my friends texting me, what's up, little, what's going on here? So I think they're doing a very good job of hitting all these very important demographics and groups that vote on certain issues and are interested in certain things. And I think we're going to have a lot more surprises the rest of the week, because you have these prominent people, but then you also have these segments on issues that are really serious and hard to talk about. I mean, the thing that got me the most so far, in an emotional way, was when they had the reproductive freedom segment and they had the couple, the mom and the daughter, and them talking about their experiences. And just, I don't think people always conceptualize how hard and tough and serious these issues are. And was really meaningful when the couple was speaking, the husband was there, and he made the point that this is not just and should not just be on women to fight this fight, should be on all of us. And I think that goes for a lot of issues we're experiencing. So they're messaging really well, and they're finding really great champions to hit all these different groups.
Yeah, it's very smartly done because, as Aidan alluded to, it's one thing to talk about policy prescriptions, in a speech. It's much more effective to have an actual example, to hear those personal stories. That's much more impactful than a politician rattling off, policy talking points. And in terms of, celebrities, I think there's a long history of conventions kind of bringing in celebrities on both sides. I mean, some to much positive impact, others, I'm thinking of Clint Eastwood in the empty chair in 2012 Romney's convention, did go over so well. But yeah, I think, celebrities are known commodities. They appeal to people, they draw people in, friends of Aidan texting him, they're engaged. We know that, especially with younger people, that's kind of thing that will draw them in to maybe watch a clip or two on TikTok, right? Not all of them are going to be kind of glued to the entire convention every night, but those also make for really good shareable moments. Now, if they could get Taylor Swift or somebody out there tonight or tomorrow night, that would be quite the coup. But I do think, celebrities are relatable to people. And I think just in terms of entertainment and shareable value, play an important part in the kind of thinking when you're producing a convention like this.
Okay, and this is our last question from the audience, which we got from Instagram. But, there's a lot going on in the world, and obviously the national and international events influence the messaging that happens at both conventions. But how would you compare the tone of this convention I mean, you're here now live and at it versus the Republican convention that happened earlier this year in Milwaukee. Um, both coming out of both, I think both parties feel like they're going to be riding high. Obviously, the Republicans felt, I think, pretty positive post their convention, but the tone of the two probably are different. But what are your impressions? Betsy, if you maybe want to weigh in on that.
Well, I think just setting the scene, right? The Republican convention happening literally days after the assassination attempt of Donald Trump. So that already puts a very different mark on things. You saw sort of early on maybe that we were going to have like a little bit of a softer Donald Trump coming out after, an experience like that. I think it lasted for, I don't know, 15 or 20 minutes. And then he promptly kind of went back off script on his speech. But also let's think about like that convention was against a totally different opponent, right? I mean, Kamala Harris was not the nominee at that point. It was very much a convention that was, set up to go against a different opponent. So in that sense, I think it kind of had a different vibe to it. And, issues that were discussed at that convention. I don't think abortion was talked about, for example, very much at all at that convention by design, because I know that's kind of not a winning issue. Contrast that to, again, what we saw and we just talked about in terms of hearing those, very personal stories at the Democratic convention.
And Aidan, what are your thoughts about the differing tone?
So this is my first in-person convention, so I'm not sure I have much to compare the field to, but what I will say is because of the recent events and what's at stake, they've had this ability to seize on the enthusiasm and excitement and use that to push these issues and make these real to people and capture and make it real to people and might not think of what people are experiencing across the country. So they're doing an excellent job seizing this moment and using it for all it is.
Okay, well, as we close, the convention is going to come to an end soon. Aidan, what is your role going forward? I mean, as post convention, what is your role going to be as the election nears?
So our official duties sort of conclude when the convention does, but that doesn't change my commitment to making this happen. I'm from a battleground state. We don't have the luxury to sit back and stress, and that's every single year. It's on us to make this happen, so I'll be doing all I can back home to bring this home.
And Betsy, I know from your role as the executive director of the Women in Politics Institute, this is going to be a busy fall. Can you sort of give us some insight as to what you guys will be looking at as we get closer to the election?
Yeah, I mean, I think, for an Institute on Women in Politics, certainly Kamala Harris and how her campaign is going to be top of mind. We have a blog post called Gender on the Ballot. So we will be having lots of different posts from various experts engaging in conversations on our blog. Also, we'll be tracking women candidates that are running up and down the ballot and seeing how they're going to perform. And then, as I mentioned earlier, thinking about women voters and what's important to them as they approach November as well. What motivates them? It's the big cliche, but in many cases, it's all about turnout, right? Like what motivates voters to actually go to the polls. And that's why I think you'll hear a lot from the Democrats of that they're running kind of as the underdogs. Even though polls have shifted, right? They're no longer like the extreme underdogs of when Biden was on the ticket, but they are going to try to position themselves as still the underdogs because they don't want to have people have kind of a false sense of complacency and not, as Aidan was talking about, think about going out, getting their friends and family to vote, working, door knocking, all the things that go into driving turnout in a tight election. So you're not going to hear sort of like, we've got this, we're doing well. It's all the messaging is going to be, we've got a ways to go. We have to stay focused because they don't want to end up happening with what happened in 2016, where most people thought that Hillary Clinton was going to win and had the shock of their lives that night on election night.
Well, we are at time for our SPA Live from the DNC. Thank you again, Betsy and Aidan, for joining us and sharing your insights about what is happening in Chicago. And please, to our audience that is watching along, please stay tuned to all of the election programming that we're going to be doing here at the School of Public Affairs at American University as we attempt to explain what is happening in the 2024 election. Thank you again, Aidan and Betsy. Good luck for the rest of your time in Chicago.
Aidan, I will look for you on the floor tonight.
Sounds good. I'll be
Okay,
Pennsylvania's in front. I'll be in front.
Yay.
All right, we'll look for you on TV, Aidan. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye-bye.